Hello maths fans, today we're going to be adding and subtracting decimals using a written method. So no calculators unless you want to check your answers at the end. So we're just going to use written methods for adding and subtracting decimals. So let's have a look at this one. We've got 3.7 add 1.04. Now if you just rush at this, you can do all sorts of strange things. I've seen people trying to add 37 and 104 and then just put decimals in randomly. Don't do it. When you start, the first thing you must do with all decimal questions, with addition and subtraction, line up the decimal points in columns so that we know we're adding things in the right columns. So in this case, I make sure that that decimal point in the 3.7 is directly above the decimal point in the 1.04. These must be there so that we've got all of the units lined up, the decimal points lined up in a column, then we've got the tenths and the hundredths lined up in those columns. If they're not lined up, we're adding together just randomly and it's just not going to work. So step one, line them up with the decimal point above it. If you get that right, and you can add already, you're going to get this right. That's it. Once you've lined it up, I like to add in a placeholder, just so that I've got the same number of digits in both numbers that I'm adding. So I just put a 0 in there, just so that I haven't got any blank spaces. I like to see a 0 there, so that I'm thinking it through. And then the technique is exactly the same as adding whole numbers. So let's follow this one through. So I'm going to say 0 plus 4, that's 4. 7 plus 0 is 7. Decimal place stays lined up. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. And so my solution is 4.74 for that one. Now that's quite a nice easy one because I didn't have to carry any numbers. So let's look at one where we might have to carry. So here we've got 12.46 add 3.915. Let's line them up. The decimal point must be directly above the other decimal point. There it is. So that my tens, units, tenths, hundredths, and in this case we've even got thousandths, they've all got to be lined up above each other. Then once we've done that, we can just simply add them. Now I'm going to add a placeholder there, and then let's go for it. Starting at the right, always start with the least significant figures, the smallest one. 0 plus 5 is 5. 6 plus 1 is 7. 4 plus 9 is 13. So put a 3 there, carry the 1. Then the decimal point stays in the same place. 2 plus 3 plus 1 is 6. And 1 plus nothing is 1. So my answer here is 16.375. It's as easy as that. If you line them up, keep the decimal points above each other, it's easy. All right, let's move on to subtraction now. So when we're subtracting, that first rule is still so important. Line them up. If we line them up and we can do subtraction, you're going to be able to subtract with decimals. If you don't line them up and you try and do strange things in your head, you're going to make a mess. Or you're definitely going to have more chance of making a mess. So, let's line them up. Decimal point directly above the decimal point so that the units are above the units, the tenths are above the tenths, the hundredths are above the hundredths. Everything lined up beautifully. That's the number one tip for this one. This time, I'm going to say you will want to add a placeholder. I find it very difficult to look at a blank space and try and take something away from it. So stick in your placeholders. Make everything the same number of digits. Once we've done that, we just follow through normal subtraction. 0, so we start on the right. 0 minus 5 is minus 5. Now there is a way to do it by writing minus 5. We're not going to do that. We're going to borrow. So I'm going to go into this tenths column. I'm going to borrow a tenth and make that 10 there. 10 minus 5 is 5. 2 minus 4, it's a negative, can't do it. So I'm going to borrow over here. Take one of these units. So I've got 3 units there. And then this becomes 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. Decimal point stays in the same place. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to think about it. 3 minus 1, that's 2. So my answer here is 2.85. So line them up and then just careful with your borrowing. Other than that, pretty straightforward. One more example then. Let's make it a tricky one. So I've lined them up, very carefully made sure the decimal points are directly above each other. If it helps you, use squares on a page, put lines in just to make sure everything is directly lined up. Be very careful the way you write it out. Make it beautiful. Okay? Then you're going to put your placeholder in, and then we're going to start on the right. 0 minus 9. Can't do it. So we'll borrow this one. 10 minus 9 is 1. 0 minus 0, that's 0. 3 minus 8, can't do it. I want to borrow from here, but there's nothing to borrow. So I've got to borrow again. This becomes 0. This becomes 10. I'm borrowing from this one, so this becomes 9. And this becomes 13. 13 minus 8 is 5. Decimal point, where it belongs. 9 minus 3 is 6. 0 minus a blank space is nothing. So my answer there is 6.501. Quite a tricky one, because we have to borrow and borrow again. But the technique is basically the same as for whole numbers. We just line it all up. Hope that makes sense. Go and practice it. Off you go.